So this is going to be an introduction to the channel about zoysia grass, and I have Zenith zoysia grass that I did from seed, and I'm going to specifically focus on how I got to this, because there's a section in the backyard that I'm going to be filming this year as I go through the process of killing off the fescue and seeding it, and show you how I got to this point. So this was planted in June of 2020, and this section directly in front of my house is about 16,000 square feet. And I'll show you what it looks like. So it's had 2 full growing seasons, and for the most part you can't even see the dirt, it's so thick. And other than the color during the summertime, it looks just like fescue. So there's a couple spots that were bare after the first year, and I'll show you a first year section that's kind of a side yard up towards the road that I did last year in May. So it's only got 1 growing season, and I'll show you what it looks like after 1 year, but this is after 2 growing seasons. And I keep this cut about 1 inch with a rotary mower. I had it graded and then sand leveled it last year during June or July, and I'll put up some pictures of all that if I can find them. And so I was able to cut it with the rotary mower pretty low without any scalp marks, because it's pretty level. But I do have a real mower that I've been working on restoring that goes on the front of my tractor. I'm going to start using a real mower on it hopefully next spring, and I'm going to try to cut it down a little bit shorter. It looks really great at 1 inch. And we'll walk up here, I'll show you. This is kind of a side yard up towards the road. It's about 9,000 square feet. And I did the same process as I did on the front yard. There's been a lot of work done up here. I buried a culvert pipe along the road and put in a catch basin so it could get across my driveway. And I've had about 40 loads of dirt brought in along the ditch line. And you can see a little bit of color change over here on the ditch. That's just where the water set over the winter time. Doesn't seem to affect it coming out of dormancy. A lot of people will tell you that zoysia doesn't like to stay wet all winter long, but I haven't had any issues. Last year everything greened up perfect. I didn't have any dead spots at all. Didn't have to reseed anything. So this is done last May, 1 full growing season. It's cut about 1 inch too, and you can see it's probably in some spots it's thicker, because the area directly in front of my house I did scalp down to the ground and sand level it, so it did take kind of a beating last year, but it recovered exceptionally well, and the drainage was far better. The grass looked way healthier after that sand leveling. It made a visual difference, and I definitely did not water as much. But this is what it looks like after the 1 growing season. As long as you're patient with the germination of the seed, which takes probably about 3 weeks to really get started, and probably about 3 months before you really feel good about it. But you can see there's still some bare areas. This stuff will fill in within a week after it gets started growing this spring, and I put some fertilizer on it. And we'll talk about the keys to getting this really going versus failing at it. I do have a sprinkler system that does make a world of difference. You know, a lot of people don't have sprinklers, and you can still get by as long as you're willing to drag the hose around and put in the work, because it's a very short time that you have to do that, and then you'll enjoy not watering all summer long. And I'll throw up some pictures. This used to all be fescue, and I'll put some pictures of it. It was beautiful, but it was so much work, especially spring and fall time. And the expense of it too, with the fungicide applications and the overseeding every year, it just got to be to where it's so expensive. And I also like the shortcut. This is amazing to come out here and play with my kid on and kick a ball around on. And 4.5 inches tall just is not really the easiest thing to play on. And I have very few winter weeds in here, and we'll talk about some pre-emergence and stuff. I have less than I did the first year. I still have this same POA that breaks through every year. It's not a POA annua or a trivialis, but it's some type of POA family. But very few winter weeds. And this is another low area where the water runs. You can see it's kind of a different tinge of brown. I've got a catch basin put in over here, but it's really not in the right spot, so I'm gonna move that this year. I'm gonna move it over to here. This was actually some sod I transplanted from one of the landscape beds that I cut in. And then this is the fescue. This is what fescue looks like when you don't do anything to it all year and ignore it, because I was planning on killing it this year. It looks horrible and super thin, and a lot of dry areas. We haven't had too much rain this winter until recently. We got a few snowstorms, but we're gonna go through the process today of how I start. The reason I'm starting on it now in 1st of February, it's February 11th, 2022 today, is because we're turning all this into a landscape bed, and I've got the pathway marked off here. I'm gonna actually put Zoysia sod down this pathway. I've never done the sod before, but I need to get it in because I want to do some landscaping, and I want it to look nice the first year. And one of the main reasons I'm choosing sod in this area is because the sun comes up. You can see where the sun comes up in front of the house. It comes across these trees, and this area right here hardly ever gets any sun. So it's gonna be interesting to see if the sod even survives over here. If it doesn't, we'll have to come up with a new plan. But all of this is gonna become a like a perennial type garden with a few established evergreens, and then back here it's going to open back up into grass, about follow that hose pipe around. And then all this is probably about 7,000 square feet. It goes around the other side of my house and up by the garage, and I'm going to show you pretty much how we take it from this to the front, what the front yard looks like. And I'll be learning something new this year too, because this is a lot more shaded to the front yard, and it's going to be interesting to see if that affects the seed germination. I think the Zoysia will do just fine in the back, but it's going to be the germination of the seed is what may be the difference in it from the front yard. For the first year, it may not be quite as thick, but we're going to do a full grade on this. We're going to bring in some dirt, try to get some of these areas leveled. I do have irrigation in the back as well. I really don't need it back here because it stays so wet all the time, and that's one of the reasons the fescue does horrible this time of year, and then it'll this spring it'll look beautiful. But so today I'm going to mix up some Roundup, and I'll show you that process. And again, the only reason I'm doing it today is because we're going to be putting in that landscape bed up the side, which is a third of the area, and I need to get it sprayed so we can get it planted before, you know, too much into the summer. It will take a little bit longer for the Roundup to kill this time of year. It's 29 this morning. It's supposed to be 67 as a high today, and it'll take a little bit longer, but the Roundup will do just fine. It may take it a few weeks to kill the grass off, and I will say this is a key step to it. A lot of people overlook this step. If you want real good success on germinating Zoysia from seed or Bermuda, it's the same for Bermuda. And I've had experiences with both, and I've had failures with Bermuda for this reason: homeowners not wanting to scalp it to the ground. And killing the existing grass off and getting rid of the competition and scalping it to the bare dirt is the #2 things that you need to do to get the Zoysia to germinate from seed successfully. I'm just going to be using this Lesco Prosecutors. Comes from Site 1. You can get the Ranger Pro from Tractor Supply, or you can get the Roundup from Lowe's. It's all really the same. All you care about is this active ingredient right here, this glyphosate 41%. That's going to be what's going to be considered Roundup. So they do have different types of Roundup nowadays that may have some other active ingredients in it. May give you a quicker burn down, better visual response. But for the most part, this is all you need. This is going to be your cheapest option here. And if you're not careful, some of the other Roundups will have chemicals in them that have a delayed seed time on them. So you got to pay attention to how long you can seed after applying. So this one specifically, you can spray right over top of seed, and I've done it before. I've had good success with it. If you have weeds right after you finish grading, or you delay seeding for a week or two after grading, and you're going to seed and you got winter weeds or springtime weeds, just spray them right out, right over top of the seed. And I'll show you that. I'll even do a section on my backyard, spray a section right over top of the seed, and I'll show you that it really makes no difference at all. So for me, I always use this glyphosate 41% if I'm doing a kill off of a yard. That way you don't have to worry about any of the after effects of the residuals in the soil. And then I'm using baby shampoo as a surfactant. I've used on dish detergent, it works great too. I only use this stuff for Roundup. All my herbicides and fertilizers, I always use a higher end surfactant, but for Roundup I just use really whichever one I've got. All right, so that's pretty much it. Got a first application of Roundup, and the next steps are going to be minus the side of the house over here. That's going to be a little different because that's going to be landscaping. We'll treat it a little bit differently, but for the next steps of the main yard would be to let it die, and depending on the time of year, it's going to take longer or shorter amount of time. This time of year, it's probably going to take 3 or 4 weeks. I'm going to scalp it down real low, spray it again with Roundup, make sure I got everything killed. Everything, it's 100% fescue back here, so I've got some POA in there mixed in, but there's no Bermuda, which would be a totally different scenario. Probably use some different chemicals on it if there's had some Bermuda in it, and probably a 3rd or 4th Roundup application. But since no Bermuda, no noxious weeds at all other than Poa trivialis, spray it with Roundup, which I just did, scalp it to the ground, spray it again, scalp it again as low as I could possibly go, and by the time it dries up, sometime about May, I'm going to start with the process.